going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Inventing the Future podcast. Wow, it has been 7 months since I last released an episode, so it's been quite the break. But during that time, I've grown tremendously as a human and entrepreneur, and I'm excited to share a lot of the experiences and growth along with you guys. But the big thing was that I started a company in January named Mindflow. And the reason I took a pause is because at the time I was still at Meta, and balancing between Mindflow, Meta, and the podcast became a bit overwhelming. So I wanted to create a little bit of space. Fast forward a little bit, and just 4 months ago, I ended up quitting my full-time job at Meta as a software engineer to be able to go all in on Mindflow. And that has been the best decision ever of my life. And I'll explain a little more as to the thinking behind why I decided to quit my job. But more importantly, the focus of this episode will be on talking with and interviewing my co-founder, David Glass. So David is a super brilliant individual, super curious and very growth driven. But at Mindflow, he is the chief product officer, where he does many things, but he basically single-handedly designed the entire app and has made almost all of the product decisions. And one of the most impressive things is that we've gone through two pivots since we started Mindflow, which we'll talk about. Uh, and both of the insights and decisions to pivot came from David's brilliant mind. So very interesting lessons there that we will talk about and share. But yeah, David previously has co-founded a company named Momently. It's like a journaling-based journaling app. And he's also interned at Masterclass. He was a business analyst at Cisco at the time that we both quit our jobs. And he's also a great writer. He's writing a book called Tech for Humans, where he explores humanity around tech and how to design tech based on values-based design around tech. But David is an insanely curious person, and perhaps most fascinating is his approach and philosophy around life. He is a very process-oriented individual and doesn't concern himself very much with outcomes, even though he's incredibly productive and effective. So yeah, there's a lot of to explore there, both around what is Mindflow, as well as like why we quit our jobs, and more deeper, interesting questions such as what does it mean to live a meaningful life, and how can you find sources of meaning in your life to live the most fulfilling life possible. So lots to explore. Let's go ahead and dive into it and see how this conversation with David goes. Actually, one last quick note before we dive into the episode. Exciting news, the Mindflow app has launched and is in the Apple App Store now. So go check it out. You can search Mindflow Growth on the App Store or check out the link in the show notes for this episode. Cool, let's dive in. All right, welcome back, everyone, to the comeback season episode of Inventing the Future. Woo! It's been quite a couple months of break. Not only me, but Mr. David here, and I have been hard grinding on the new startup Mindflow, which this episode will cover Mindflow and Mr. Glass's genius mind over here. But yeah, very, very grateful to have you on board, David. David is my co-founder at Mindflow. But yeah, welcome to the show, David. How you doing, man?
I am doing solid. I really was really grateful that you're having me on here.
Yeah.
Excited for it.
Hell yeah. It's going to be freaking amazing. So let's see, David. We started Mindflow in January, around 7 months ago. So, but we both quit our jobs to go full into it about almost 4 months ago now. So I think where I want to start here is why the hell did you quit your job? Why entrepreneurship? Like why, you had a great job. You're a business analyst at Cisco. You had great things going for you, a nice comfortable job here in Silicon Valley. Why quit the comfort of your job and go on this treacherous, rigorous journey of entrepreneurship?
I think that like comfort isn't exactly what I'm optimizing for. It's not discomfort either, but it's like to pursue the things I want to pursue and not let something like the comfort or discomfort of it like influence like how I'm going to spend my life, like how I'm going to spend all of my days. So um, it was it was like a great gig where I was, but I think about what I wanted to do in terms of like the type of life I want to live, where I can. This is like a lot of the reason why I value entrepreneurship is because you just get to work on like really hard things with really smart people, and like you get to choose basically for the most part what you're working on. So it's inherently like you choose something you care about, and like those three things are just so powerful that it's not even like a question of like why did you leave? It's like a what am I going to? And like to me, that's a beautiful thing to be going towards. So like those are just three like awesome magnets that I'd love to have in my life at all times.
Interesting. And why do you care about doing hard things? Like most people would prefer the comfort. It seems like you're driven or attracted to the hardship and challenges rather than deterred by it. Why do you care about hard things?
Um, I just think that hard things are fun to work on, and that most of the things worth doing are hard. Like that's the reason that they're still left to be solved is because if it wasn't hard, then people would have already done it already. So most of the stuff that's left to do is just like inherently challenging.
Yeah, yeah. No, it definitely adds to the fun pursuit of figuring out how to overcome those challenges.
I'm never gonna let that stop me from you either. So.
Yeah, never. That can never get in the way. If anything, it's a motivation to figure out how to overcome the challenges. That's kind of what adds fire to the fuel. Great. So then, you decided to take the bold move. We both decided to take the bold move of quitting our jobs like 4 months ago. Like what was kind of going through your head at that point? Like how did you come to the point where you made this decision and just said, like, fuck it, I'm going to take the quantum leap. We hadn't raised money at the point also. So I don't know, what was going through your mind and why did you ultimately decide to make the bold move at that time?
It's funny because my mindset at the time was like pretty simple, and I've often felt like my thought patterns are like this for most big decisions, where things just become like completely clear. Like I maybe it's a me thing, but like all the times with like smaller decisions is where things get cloudy. But for big things like that, you think about it for so long, and like the right thing after you mess around with it and you're like in the problem for a while just kind of becomes clear. And so it was no longer like an if situation, like should I do this thing, should I leave? It was like a when.
Yeah.
And whenever I think that you're in a situation where it's like, okay, when should I do this? The default answer should always just be now. Now isn't always gonna be the right answer, but I think far more often than not, you'd be better off just sending it now. And my risk tolerance is right now at this point in my life are as high as they'll ever be, ever be. So like, if not now, then when?
Yeah.
And so like, let's just send it. Let's see what happens. Put it out in the universe, and good things may happen.
Yeah, you never know. But yeah, not easy. I mean, like what were some of the like limiting beliefs or challenges or things that went through your mind that caused hesitation, and how did you overcome that?
Well, I think there's like the situation of just what we were doing itself at such an early stage. There's obviously so many things that we just didn't have figured out, and that weren't going to be like easily or quickly figured out either. So it's like definitely just a leap of faith, because there's just so many uncertainties, and it's like, what are the important things to have trust in? And, a lot of it in this case for me was like the general area that we both cared about, the same things. Most of it is like kind of the people you're working with, amazing co-founder over here that just had like ton of confidence in that, like, a good just default position is just surround yourself with winners, surround yourself with people that work hard and have like awesome mindsets. And like opt for action, default for action as well. So I think if you like default for action and for working with like just really hardworking, awesome people, that you end up in good places and you figure out a lot of those things that you didn't know at the time. And but at the time, there's like so many things that like definitely made me like pretty stressed out or nervous. That like I don't know exactly like where we're gonna end up on this or which direction we'll go on this thing or like what we're even doing exactly at this point in time when we're leaving. So it's kind of like a send it and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of uncertainty at the time, but I think that's a natural part of the process that you have to overcome. And when you have such a strong conviction, you're like, we're going to send it anyways. Yeah, I remember during that time, like for myself, I was a software engineer at Meta, but for me, like there were several things that kind of guided this decision to want to leave. One was just like this idea of working or creating something that didn't exist before, right? Like my team at Meta was awesome. I loved the work. I was super passionate about it. But there's this special feeling about knowing that if I start a company, I'm literally like in that 0 to 1 process, creating something that would not have existed before. And the thrill that gives me is incomparable to like working for any company. So that was one. Second also is like just the sheer learning opportunity and the growth curve. I mean, startups are freaking hard as shit. Not easy at all. But the fun part about that is that you have so much more to like learn and grow from. And so, like at Meta, I was just mostly coding, learning a little bit about the company, team dynamics, how they run things. But here as a founder, I'm learning how do you sell the company? How do you raise money? How do you manage a team? How do you hire? And I'm still coding a lot. That's what my whole life has been coding these last 3-4 weeks. But it's freaking awesome. So, and then the final thing I would say is this notion of having the full autonomy and ownership to just go and directly do what you want. And the important thing about that is that it's infinitely easier to align your work with who you are and your purpose in life when it's directly connected, when you have the autonomy to choose what to work on. And as we'll later dive into like what Mindflow is, you'll see how aligned it is to our core.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one thing you hint at there that's pretty interesting, it's like a thread that, strings throughout all of this is autonomy.
Yeah.
Like, it's just such a like freeing and special feeling to have all sorts of types of autonomy in your life, like that's now unlocked by this that you kind of didn't even realize before, like on autonomy over your time, over like creative decisions, over strategy. That also leads to like a much higher growth curve too, because you're entirely responsible. And especially when you don't have like a path set out for you, like sometimes that autonomy can be overwhelming even.
Yes. Yeah, no, I mean, like, I think one of the biggest differences is that at a big company, you have so many layers of support, people above you, anything. Here in Startup Land, you don't really have like that much support internally. Although that's why it's really important to find communities like Founders Inc., where we're at now, of other entrepreneurs and investors that have been through the trenches and know what it's like. But it can be overwhelming, but that's also how you learn the most, is going through that. Totally. But awesome, cool. So let's transition into Mindflow. So what in the world is Mindflow? How would you describe what we are building succinctly?
Yeah, so it's a growth-driven social platform. A lot of the way I think about it is in terms of making it super easy to take daily action to collect small, just daily wins in your life and make that super easy and convenient to do and get positive momentum. And then to, alongside that, make it super simple and straightforward to support your friends along their growth journey and to like get support along your growth journey as well. So kind of a new axis of social platform that we're super stoked about bringing to the world. I know we just had a really exciting this morning today. We actually officially submitted to the App Store. So hopefully by the time you're listening to this, being that we get approved, that it should be in the hands of all of you beautiful listeners.
Yes, very exciting. After a little over a month of grinding like crazy, We finally submitted to the App Store today. I don't think I've ever worked harder on anything, but I've also never been prouder of anything that we've created before. So, fuck yeah, that's gonna be hype. But yeah, it really like we're the goal here is that you have growth driven people that like want to build habits, they want to become better, they're always looking for that edge, like how do you become 1% better every day. And it's really hard because changing is not easy, and this many stats show that a grand majority of people, 92-96% of people that try to build a habit or change end up failing. So our big question is, how do you make that fun? How do you make that rewarding? And how can you build social experiences around it and leverage behind behavioral science principles, such as social accountability, to help people, give them the support to take action and become their best selves? So what else would you say, David, of like, why are we doing this? Why are we building this product?
I mean, I think just to start off with, this is something we're both kind of obsessed with.
Yeah.
It's something that we've both, dabbled with, not even dabbled with, just like full on adopted in our lives, both for us for the past at least 6 years, I'd say.
Yes.
And had our own like personal growth journeys. And so I think that's a huge part of it. And then along that end of like our own growth journeys, like seeing what hasn't worked or what have been the struggles along the way, but also like what have been the beautiful parts of it, like what parts of our growth journeys we want to create more of in the world, to create more feelings of like regular progress, of like going to sleep knowing that you moved your life forward, of like looking back and realizing like, oh snap, like I don't barely even recognize the person who I was 6 months ago. And this is all just like, just taking action, doing things on a regular basis, and then slowly over time you make these exponential leaps, and it's really awesome to see.
Yeah, it is a beautiful journey. And as David said, actually, like he said, we're both obsessed about this area of personal growth. And that was another reason I decided to leave Meta, was because Meta was a passion, Mindflow was an obsession. And when an obsession becomes like almost everything you think about, it takes away energy from everything else. It becomes all consuming. But yeah, we've both undergone pretty transformative personal growth journeys. For me, it was going to a Tony Robbins seminar when I was 19, 6 years ago, and experiencing an exponential shift and perspective in like the sense of purpose that I have in the world, being like a very self-centered ambition, being purely centered around wealth, to an external one that kind of had the focus on my success being directly connected to the success of all humanity. I don't know. There's like so much energy around the uncovering of my potential and realizing that what fulfills me the most is being able to empower others to discover what the hell they have inside of them and what they're capable of doing. But what is it for you, David? Like what, tell us a little bit about your personal growth journey, how you got into this space and why it's been so impactful for you.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with two like pretty significant, like critical stories, and they might seem like random, but somehow they all kind of snowballed together. And these are both during high school, actually. One is cross country. So I was on the cross country team. I totally love to run, and this was like just where I learned hard work, where I learned consistency, how to plan, like multi-level goals of you show up every day to practice, you run, you like experiment a little bit, you get feedback, you push yourself. You have weekly meets, like every Saturday, where you get to like put yourself to the test and see where you measure up. You get to go all out in pursuit of a thing and really see where you land. You have championship races where it's like the ultimate test, where like everything's building this. So you have like daily, you have medium like sized goals and intervals. You have big, large things that you're working towards, and this is all over like a fairly large scale. So I think this is a really beautiful thing that sports enabled. And I think even like if you take it back to the inception of my my whole like running journey, I think I had told you about this the other day, but I actually started running because of a tennis like camp. I was at a sleepaway camp essentially, and trying to get the highest award in this in the tennis program. And they do this crazy thing where you have a week long where you have to show up 3 times a day. So 5:30 a.m. from like 5:30 to 7:30, from 11 to 12, and then like 4 to 5:30. And you'd think that you're playing tennis, but you'd get there at 5:30 and you'd be doing sprints. You'd be doing like laps around all like 10 tennis courts. All sorts of like different, just like evil ways to basically torture you through running and sprinting. And the crazy thing is that they would cut people at the end of every day, who, well, I'd say they cut people, but like half the people probably quit. But some people also got cut as well if they were the slower ones. And this sounds like a crazy thing to enjoy, but I guess I kind of found out that I was somewhat good at this, and something about it really just lit a fire in me, and I loved it. And that led to me joining the cross country team in my 8th grade year, which kind of spiraled into this. And through cross country, like I learned like all that hard work and goal setting and everything like that. Had a 500-mile training summer going into my senior year, and then I got to be the captain of the team as well. So learned leadership skills, and this is really big. And so the other experience, which is kind of tangential to this one, is the SAT, which is like a pretty weird thing. Most people don't really like the SAT or standardized tests. Maybe I'm an area, I don't know. But I kind of got obsessed with the SAT.
Whoa.
I took it the first time, like a practice test, got a pretty like average, probably like a pretty far like below average score, in fact. And then started doing a lot of practice tests, worked with a tutor and everything on a weekly basis. And then I kind of just like got into this slow grind where I'd like order all these SAT books around like a specific topic, like a math book, do all the problems in it, go and take another practice test, like work on specific things, get feedback from my tutor, work on those areas, and became, I think, out of his like 10,000 students over like a decade, one of like 3 people to finish every practice test or like practice problem that they had. And I just got totally obsessed with like improving, showing up on a regular basis. You see this through cross country as well, but here in the SAT, like showing up on a regular basis, like having a way to practice, having a way to get feedback and improve, having like medium term goals, so like these practice tests, like see how I was doing and measure up, and then like having like the real deal, the championships of the SATs. And there was like failure in there as well. Like I put just a crap ton of effort in and time, and then went and took it the next time, and then barely even improved, even though my practice test had improved a ton. It was honestly kind of like depressing. But then like just kept at it, and then almost you get like a evil grin. It sounds weird, but like you're like, oh yeah, like I like that. Like got to work harder for it now. It's kind of fun. Like makes the story better. Like in your head of like just that main character energy. But then like eventually through it all ended up like progressing a lot and then doing better and better. And I think both of those experiences taught me so much about like how to organize your life and how to pursue excellence in the things that you care about.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I love how you break down those stories in terms of also like what are the goals that were in place, the challenges that were, and it seems like there was like the specific outcome you had, and you thought that would be the primary value you would extract from doing this, but actually it turned out to be who you became in the process of achieving this grand goal that really was where the main growth existed, and being able to overcome that. So how does that connect then with what Mindflow is and what we're about? Like, how do you translate that personal growth journey into what you want to create and give to others?
I would say a lot of it is just, and like these things, like I'm not a master at this, you're not a master at this. We're all like on perpetual growth journeys, but learning ways to show up consistently and like figuring out where you want to show up consistently. I guess you could think of it either way, of like if it's more important to like choose where you want to show up, or if it's more important to just show up and then like over time configure that. Both are valid paths. I think we both default to action though, and then figure it out as you go. But I think that is a really beautiful thing that would love to see, I guess, just like we're trying to model that in the world. We'd love to see more of that action focused. I think much of our culture today has become far too consumption focused. There's like infinite amount of ways now to consume things from the world. And yes, it's getting easier to create things as well. I mean, TikTok makes it a lot easier than ever is one example to like create quality content. But the amount of different ways and amount of content to be able to that you can consume in the world is exponentially increasing far more than the ability to create. So I think like however we can inspire more creation, more action, more doing in the world, this is something that's really important to me personally. Like this is honestly where a lot of my interest in entrepreneurship started, is having an admiration for people who just like take action in the world. I started reading a lot of biographies and stuff, you know, watching documentaries and things, and I was just like, all of my role models I found out were, and even like a few professors as well, were like all my role models were just people who took action and did things. They like lived in the arena of life. People like, you know, Richard Feynman, I think like Patrick Collison, Kobe Bryant, some like really awesome people, but like these are hardcore doers. And that is something that's like a deeply fulfilling way to live in my eyes. And I think at the time that I realized this, like I wasn't exactly living in that sort of way yet. So there was a gap there, and it's like slowly figuring out how to become this type of person that I really deeply admire the qualities, like want to admire yourself. And yeah.
I really like that. And actually that touches a lot on our story as a company, because the place we started was a learning platform. It was very consumption based, and we've now had 2 pivots where now we're way more action focused. But it's kind of interesting. Let's dive a little into the journey here, because I think those pivots are interesting to highlight. And you know, you see a company, you see a person where they are today, but the transformations behind that occurred to lead to where they are very telling of why they are the way they are today. Same for a person as it is for a company. So very succinct history. Mindflow started, the idea for it came because I fell into the NFT and Web3 rabbit hole. And in that, I discovered the play to earn game Axie Infinity, where you could basically like earn crypto for playing a game. It was pretty crazy. But you have to buy Axies to play the game, buy these NFTs. So I sponsored scholars across the Philippines and Venezuela. They play the game, I buy the Axies, we split for revenues, and it became a source of passive income. I was so impressed by the economic opportunity this created that I was like, this is great, but gaming isn't that practical. What if we did the same for learning, right? Learn to earn instead of play to earn. So that's kind of like how the genesis of Mindflow came to be. And then we built a platform that basically like financially rewarded people to learn. So David, you joined in there in the beginning. Like what was this like initial version, and what did we pivot to and why?
Yeah, so the initial thing we built, like as you're kind of alluding to, we were really interested in this, like the play to earn model. And if play to earn works, then why not, you know, extend that beyond? Like why not, if you can do it for like video games, why can't you do it for something that's, you know, traditionally considered productive? And so we came upon a learn to earn platform. I like to kind of think of it, the initial thing we built, as almost like a medium style platform where you'd have these different articles on soft skills, and you'd read them, and at the end of the article there'd be a question to apply it to your own life, help you integrate it. And then for every question you answered, you get 50 cents equivalent in Polygon Matic token. So I think that's kind of the initial thing we built. Obviously, I think the most important thing is that we just got started. We had some sort of insight. We built something. We worked really hard on it, made some mistakes, but we built a thing, got it out in the world, and then got people using it. I think we had like 230 people on the platform over a span of like, I think roughly 2 months. And in that period, we learned a lot of things. One, something we were like from the start trying to figure out, like canoodling on, pretty worried about, is this like idea that like of the Ponzi scheme-ish nature of to earn models as they currently exist.
Yeah, and by the way, like Axie Infinity, the SLP, the token you get for playing, it's gone down over 99% since its peak. So very, very Ponzi scheme-ish in that nature. By the way, I've lost Axie Infinity has been my best investment. Not because of the money, I lost a lot of money, but because it led to Mindflow. Okay, sorry, go on.
I don't know. That's goodness there. So that is one aspect of it, is this like Ponzi scheme nature of like, in the long run, this just isn't sustainable. Got to figure out a way to like make it more sustainable or whatnot. The other part of it, this is something that I was personally really worried about, is like the challenge of what we care about is learning in this system, like of our learning journey platform. The part we cared about is learning and helping people do that. Now, the idea, like from the start, is that paying people will help people do more of learning. But the question is it necessarily addition, or is it like a form of subtraction? And started to read a lot of research papers, particularly a lot from this branch of research from Kenneth Arrow on crowding out, that incentives, especially monetary incentives, actually detract from our intrinsic motivation to do a thing.
Yep.
So that like if I love to learn and I want to learn, then you pay me 50 cents per like article, per like awesome article I read, that like in a lot of ways that kind of like undermines my desire to learn. Like, oh, first of all, I valued my curiosity at more than 50 cents, so like you would have had to price it correctly to even be good there. So like one, you're undermining it in that sense, but also you're taking a thing that like I valued because of like its way of helping me improve and grow, and like the things enabled for me of like a way to express my curiosity and desire to just be a person who grows in general. And now you're placing a monetary worth on it, in like kind of implying that it's not valuable on its own, that you have to be paid to do a thing.
Yeah.
And so these are concerns that I was really battling with at the time, and like just, you know, in the process of slowly thinking about a thing over time, hearing users talk, one of the biggest insights I've had just from this whole journey is that like when you're consistently taking action and like collecting feedback, and when you're like the first thing you think of when you wake up in the morning and the last thing you think of when you go to sleep is the same thing. They're like just over time you collect slowly like profound insights. They don't happen like all at once, or like not like on command, but like slowly it's like very clearly unveils itself of like, oh, that's how we could do this. And so I think to move on to like to the next pivot from there, it's what I had realized is like, or what I had thought about at least, is that, okay, a way we could do this in maybe a more sustainable way is that what if we made it into a tournament, and that we have people like pay to enter the tournament, and it's like a learning or a personal growth tournament. The people who like actually participate or do well receive a reward, get money, and the people who don't, like they still pay the entry fee, but they're basically like subsidizing the winners. Yep. So this is something that's like not tied to a token value. It's not tied to like the market or anything. It's intrinsically like more sustainable.
Yeah, because it's expected, right? Like you get $1,000 from 40 people that participate, and then 1/3 of that goes to the top performers, right? Because you take action, you earn points for taking action, and then the points determine where you rank on the leaderboard, and then depending on where you rank, you earn different rewards, right? So 1/3 goes to them, and then 1/3 goes to us. That's our business model, very predictable. And then 1/3 would go to this idea of user-to-user gifts, where they would like reward each other for taking action and doing cool things.
Right. So then we had scrapped together an MVP for this new version. We called it like the Mindflow games. Basically hosted like a 4-day competition, personal growth competition, where we'd give people like we call it daily quests. There's like a set of like, we put like together like 10 actions across some different categories, like learning, like here's a cool thing, a cool article or video, check it out. Wellness, so like go for a run, do some push-ups, or like do this cool breathing technique. We had reflection or self-discovery quests, so like nice introspective prompts. There were seek discomfort things to do, stupid things, like go dance in public to your favorite song, or go, try and ask for your coffee for free.
Mhm.
And we really learned so much from doing this. It was like a lot of fun to host was the first part. Like, I think that was maybe the first insight that I found that was different than the first thing. It's like, whoa, like this is actually really fun. Like, A, to put together, and like B, to see people like participate. Like, we had like users on the first version, and it was like obviously cool to see yourselves like getting users, but it wasn't like intrinsically like, wow, this is amazing. Versus I kind of felt that way with the new thing that we were enabling, which is a really cool experience. Like, see people taking action, doing things, and then you're like, wow, like we kind of just created that in the world. We like put that out there. And one of my favorite parts of the Mindflow Games experience is like noticing these second order effects that happened of like unexpected outcomes. So it's like have like a couple of different examples, but like we had one participant, Jacob, who had done these outdoor based wellness quests, like go outside and run, like lay in the grass, whatever. And after the experience, he like a week after he went out and bought a bike. Like he was like, oh, I love like some of these outdoor things so much that like, when I'm going to transition from the gym to like actually buying a bike and doing these cool things. We had another girl, Ellie, who she went after some of the reflection quests on like considering her relationships and people she knew. She went on her Instagram and unfollowed everyone who she wouldn't hug if she ran into on the street. It's like, oh my goodness. Like,
What a great heuristic.
yeah. Like, this is not something we said to do. It was just like an awesome idea. It's something that kind of like sparked from just giving things to a growth-driven person, and like them taking action, and then leading to other cool things. And it was like, okay, let's create more of that in the world. And so with the games experience, it wasn't perfect, but it was pretty cool. And I'd say there's 4 main aspects of it. There was the convenience of like being handed tasks every day, and like how to do them. There was the rewards, so we were actually paying like basically the winners, up to $80. There was the social aspect of it, so we put all of them in a WhatsApp group. We also like made like a fake feed.
A social feed, yeah, like Instagram-esque.
Yeah. And then we also had people like supporting each other, like giving each other hearts for the quests and things like that. And then the last part of it is like the competition aspect. And then like of these 4 aspects, what we found is nobody talked about the money, which is like pretty funny because if we're gonna be paying people all this money, like it's not like all of the money in the world, but like $80 is like definitely not nothing. So people aren't gonna mention that. And okay, cool, it's even better. And then what people did really talk about a lot is the social aspect. They like loved seeing other people doing cool things, and I think like with the seek discomfort ones in particular, it's like not everyone did them. Actually, it was only like a few people that did some of these crazy wacky tasks. But everyone or a bunch of people talked about like, oh, I love seeing them do that, and like, oh, I saw them do that, and then it made me like think like, oh, maybe I could do that. It's like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then like seeing discussions that came about in the chat from some of like the learning quests as well. So the social aspect was really key, and as was the convenience. We heard this a lot, like people saying it was just nice to wake up with having like clear ways to get wins in their day laid out.
Yeah.
And so from there, we had something that like kind of worked in general, but it's like, okay, why don't we take these 2 factors, the social aspect and the convenience aspect, and like dial those all the way up to 10, and see what happens. And that kind of led us now to like our latest pivot and like what we're full sending now. And that we're really excited about with this like social-based experience, like a social app that's really focused on support and the community aspect, but then also on the convenience of like, let's, instead of having like 10 tasks a day that you get given, maybe you get like 4 now, so it's less overwhelming, but it's just some simple ways, novel ways to like, get wins in your day, grow alongside your friends.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the key idea of the quest you get every day is like convenient, positive actions that can help you move forward in your growth journey. But yeah, that's the interesting component. We built something, we talked with people, see what they thought about it. What did you like? And the big question here was like, okay, out of the 48 participants across 2 seasons, there was over 400 quests completed. Those are actions that people would likely not have taken otherwise. So the big question is like, why'd you take action? What motivated you, right? And so the convenience, the gamification, and the social components came up consistently, and we decided to dial down heavily on 2 of them, and that's kind of like what led to this pivot. So I think a big lesson there is it's not that the Mindflow games weren't working. It's that we identified a much better opportunity for how we could do this at greater scale, right? No barrier to entry, no $25 to enter. And it's an always on thing, not 4 days, but rather every day, so that you can build consistency around taking action. Because, growth is something you have to do consistently, not just like 4 days and then that's it. So very interesting lessons in the pivot. It's sometimes not that it's not working, but rather there's a better opportunity. So yeah, some great lessons there along the journey. And so, yeah, kind of like wanting to move forward here, David, one thing that I want to get to understand you better. And one thing like I've noticed is that you tend to be very process focused rather than outcome focused, right? Most people, they set a goal and they're like, I'm gonna go achieve this goal, run a marathon, whatever, but you don't really seem to care too much about like big goals. You seem to be more focused on like, what is meaningful to me and how can I make sure I'm doing that every day? I'd love if you could like expand on that like philosophy or why you operate in such a manner.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I am, your insight is correct. I'm definitely a very process-driven person. Um, and to me, what it boils down to is that, like, you live your life on a daily basis. So why not focus on the aspect of a day instead of, like, focusing way too far on the future? And the other part of it is attachment. So to me, it's like kind of useless to attach yourself to these far out, like very specific goals, like that are way out there in the future, because it's not necessarily going to come like true. I think it's important to set goals, like and ambitious goals, like that. I think is super important, but I think it's really important not to attach yourself to those. And to instead just like focus on like, okay, what are the ways that I want to regularly show up? And if you do those and you show up the way you want to consistently, you'll move like in the general direction of the goal that you care about. Maybe it won't be in the exact way, maybe it will be, but it'll lead you where you need to go. And to me, it's also just like the most fulfilling way to live is to focus on like, okay, what are the things that make a day meaningful? What are the things like when I think about like what is success, I would put it like actually in the frame of a day. Like, okay, not like what is a successful life? Like a successful life is like a series of successful days in my mind. And a successful day is like when I'm doing things that feel fulfilling, when I feel content, feel like I'm slowly growing. And there's a bunch of different ways to do this in like different aspects of different seasons of your life. So it's important to identify like, which are the ones that are important to you at the time, and then to like go hard on those.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so it's a life that's very focused on what is like the most meaningful to you and how can I do that day to day? Because I think the challenge here in being like outcome or goal driven is that you tend to do a lot of things to achieve those goals that you don't necessarily enjoy very much. So it's more so the outcome you want, but we live in the journey, not in the outcome. So that's kind of what we need to do most often. So how do you find these sources of meaning? Like, how did you figure out what was meaningful to you? And like, is there any like process, framework, questions you would recommend people think about to identify their sources of meaning and how they can live in a day-to-day with more meaning?
Yeah, so this is something that I've dived in, really deep into lately. And also have to give a big shout out to the School for Social Design, Human Systems, this whole program that Joe Edelman has put together. He's done years and years of thinking on this, and I really benefited from getting to like work with him and learn from a lot of his studies there. But there's a couple different angles of looking at this, and a lot of it just requires like constant, regular introspection, and like paying attention to your emotions and your environment. So one way that I do this on a regular basis is that like I'll take any emotion and then trace that or extract from it what thing is important to me Because the idea is that like every emotion traces back to like something that you care about and something that is meaningful to you.
Yeah.
A negative emotion being that like something that you care about is perhaps blocked, or like you can't reach it. Maybe if you're sad, like you can't reach it. If you're angry, it's being blocked. Or maybe if you're like really excited, that like something that is a source of meaning for you is really close, or is there present. So one is this like emotions to values practice and like doing this constantly. The other part of it, and these kind of like tie together honestly, is like focusing on meaningful stories. So I like guarantee that like I can do this, anyone can do it, is you take just a story that is inherently meaningful to you. It's like pretty obviously meaningful. It's like a big story. And then from there, you like write out the full thing, and then you like look at, when you want to figure out what's meaningful to you, you look to where you spend your attention when you're doing that thing. Not where you spend your time, but where you spend your attention.
Yeah. What are you paying attention to? What are you noticing, observing, seeing?
Yeah. Precisely. And so maybe like you list all of those things out. So let's say that like I said, running is oftentimes really meaningful to me. I think about like what are all the things that I pay attention to on like a really meaningful run. Let's say like one type of meaningful run to me is like when I'm out in the woods and like on a really cool trail, and then I just get totally lost in like my head and in nature. And so like what are the things I'm paying attention to? One, I'm like trying not to trip, but like that's not inherently like meaningful. So like, maybe I'd like sort that one lower in the ranking. Like maybe I'm also paying attention to like the wind on my face, or like my breath, or like being controlling my breath, and that's meaningful. Or like the rhythm of my thoughts. And so like being able to sort those things that I'm paying attention to into like what's meaningful, what's not, and then you'll see that they like will usually center on like a specific type of thing. So like maybe this one I'm talking about of running in the woods centers around in some sort of type of like flow in nature. Like I'd say the same source of meaning probably exists for me when I'm like skiing, actually, oftentimes. And so if you go back to like the emotions to values practice now, like I would think about the emotion, but then I'd also think about the story and how that relates. And so if you go through both those things and you just do this, I've been doing this on like a regular basis now. Actually been posting like a Twitter thread trying to hold myself more accountable to this. You just slowly start to account for like different sources of meaning. People often think that they have like one like massively aligned purpose, but in fact it like turns out that there's a lot of purposes that you might have, depending on the context, or what you care about in the given moment. There's a lot of different ways that you can live a purpose-driven life. And it's just about finding those, and then from that awareness, finding what's blocking those so you can get rid of that, and then like what's blocking it so you can like have more of it, but also like when you know the things that you want and like the ways that are fulfilling and meaningful to live, you can just inherently like seek it out more often or create it more in your life. Like it's a lot easier to create those types of events or plan those types of things in your day and your week, if you know what they are.
Yeah, this is awesome. I mean, this is a philosophy literally on how to live, and why not live a more meaningful life if that's an option to you. It really just takes greater awareness. I mean, one thing that's been helpful for me, because I've been learning through you about this, is this concept of emotional resonance. It's kind of like in any moment, if you hear something, if you feel something, and it resonates very deeply, there's always the big thing to do there is like, why did that make me feel that way? Why am I resonating with this on such a deep level? And the consistent asking of why is usually can help you uncover a source of meaning that's buried deeply within there.
You're like, why did this annoy me? A lot of times, like, there's many reasons you could be annoyed about a thing, but like, how often do you actually think about it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's really the key to self-awareness and self-discovery. And actually, I want to share one very quick breakthrough that you helped me get. So when I went to my first Tony Robbins seminar, I really, like, my mind transformed completely. And I basically redefined a purpose that was much bigger than anything I could ever be. But I realized that purpose, which I articulate as being to empower myself and others, to discover and manifest their infinite potential, I realized that purpose came as a byproduct of discovering and becoming aware of different sources of meaning that kind of combine into one. So for example, two of the sources of meaning that are very true and attached to my purpose are, one, it's contributing to something beyond myself. That is a source of meaning to me that really like drives me deep to another level. And the other one is like growing and discovering what I'm capable of, right? Like at the harder things I try to do, the harder the problems I try to solve, the more of my potential I'm discovering and figuring out what I'm capable of doing. And that is very meaningful to me. And so my purpose is kind of like combining all of these sources of meaning together and whatnot. So if you want to discover your purpose, why you're here and why the hell you're doing what you're doing or what you want to do, start with those sources of meaning. Those are like the building blocks that lead to the big things. And if you already have the big thing like a purpose, then figure out what are the building blocks that make it, and then you can learn how to restructure them. So,
and if you're interested in learning more about stuff, I'm sure we'll link
yes,
some interesting sources to check out.
Yes, I'll link Joe Edelman's stuff. He's the thought leader there. But great. Coming to a close here, David. Last few questions. So, one is, you've been a founder for some time now, and you also previously had a startup, Momently. But I'm curious, you've learned a lot through your entrepreneurial journey. So I'm curious, like, what has entrepreneurship, in both its agonizing and glorious moments, what has it taught you about life?
I mean, many things for sure, but two things that really stand out to me is like just the need, we've reiterated this a lot, but like the need to just take action, start. You'll figure it out, or you'll figure some things out, but you're surely not going to figure it out by just sitting there and thinking. The only way to actually do these things is to just take action, just start, put it out into the universe, and as they say in The Alchemist, it'll conspire to make it happen, put it out into the world. The other thing is the constant need to like just reinvent yourself. Entrepreneurship has just really taught me that there's such a high like standard. It's just such a hard thing to do, to like make something, as YC says, that like make something the world wants. That's a pretty high bar to live up to. And I put myself on an even higher bar of like make something that adds meaning to people's lives. So in order to do that, it requires a lot of yourself. We've noted this a couple of times that like, whoa, like doing this together and doing this entrepreneurship, this startup journey is just our own like personal growth journey. Is like doing this. It's like attaching a jetpack to yourself, because it like requires so much of you. And I actually think it goes back to even like what we were talking about with sports before, that they require your best and like they're a way for you to live all out. And I think that most people are like missing that beyond like their schooling years, and that startups are actually a way to do that, because it requires like just the complete best of you in order to not fail. So much of startups is like even just surviving. So you have to constantly like reinvent yourself. You have to get feedback. You have to work hard. You have to get better at things. You have to learn things, especially in the early scene. Like when you're wearing so many hats, you got to learn like new skills. You got to learn what to do. I just committed my first code today, which is super exciting.
He passed the coding boot camp. Oh my God. Don't delete the repository, please.
So it's an endless journey, and I'm grateful to Startup Life for that.
Yes. No, it's you really do learn a lot. And the way I like to think about it is that startups are really hard, especially when you're solving really big and challenging problems. But the bigger the problem is, the greater the growth opportunity is, because if you want to solve that problem, you have no choice but to grow in order to get to the point where you have the ability to actually solve that problem. Yeah. So it's kind of like forced or demanded growth, which often you need in order to actually grow.
You know what they say? Bigger the problem, bigger the man.
That's a good one. Hadn't heard it. Love it. Okay, cool. Last two questions. So, you're very action focused. So I'm curious if you had the opportunity to recommend one actionable thing for young entrepreneurs to do to either become a better human or better entrepreneur, what is one action you would recommend for people to do?
Maybe I'll cheat and go with 1.5 here, but
okay.
To go off what you're saying, just start. Like we were saying before, just start. That's the baseline for it. Once you do that, you can start to figure the rest out. But until you start, nothing else really matters. The other thing I would say along the meaning end of like one actual thing that I think a lot of founders should consider, and a perspective that a lot of them don't, is like not only what problem does your thing solve, that's just one end of it, is like solving a problem that people have, but like what source of meaning do you want to enable, or like even just like what way of being do you want to create in the world, where like imagine that like 3 million people are using your product, or like 300 million people are using whatever you created. Like, what type of world would you want that to be? Like, because of your thing. Like, maybe you want to like enable more vulnerability in the world, or like a greater sense of connection, or like deeper family bonds. Maybe you want curiosity, or all sorts of different things. Maybe like laughter. So I think just by solving the problem, maybe you get like a part of the way there, but that's only like half the answer. I think until you flip it, like when you flip it, you get kind of like, I think, a different direction of decision making. And of course you have to do both. I actually think that when you think about it from like, what do you want to enable in the world? You have to look at like what's blocking that from being enabled.
Yeah.
And like what's blocking that are the problems you have to solve. And usually like what's blocking it, like one of those will be the problem that you thought about it at first, but there's probably going to be a lot of other problems too. In order to create that thing, that you got to solve a bunch of these other things and get those blocks out of the way so that the water can flow.
Yeah. Whoa, that was a good flow. Cool. I love that. And I mean, related to that, I mean, you're telling people here to kind of discover who they want to become and how they want to see the world and to create that. Well, I'm curious for yourself as a final question, like what role do you specifically want to play in the invention of the future? How will you invent the future?
I'd say in a couple ways. Like one, is I think that technology has the power to create just so much in our world, so much good and so much bad as well. A lot of neutral stuff, which I'd probably lump into bad because it's just noise. It's because, in a lot of ways, just like the fact that technology creates so much things, it creates just a lot of added complexity in our lives. And one role that I really love to have just, in my life is, doing what I can to steer technology towards good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's it.
That's a good role to play in a world with so much technology that isn't always super productive. But that's why we're planting our seeds in the world with Mindflow to help in that regard. But cool, David, thank you for coming on. Any like shout outs for socials where people can stay connected and learn more about you?
Yeah, super grateful for you having me on here. Check out, let's see, what are my handles? Check out on Twitter. What's my Twitter?
DG exists.
Yeah, DG exists. Check it out. You can also check out my Instagram at dglass1. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you for coming on. And what a great way to make the comeback with my beloved co-founder. Cool. Thank you all for listening. And as always, stay infinite.